Good morning. It's freezing cold in Dallas, Plano, and we're not going to be able to have services tomorrow because we cannot keep our auditorium warm nor the rest of our building. We had school yesterday and just about froze. We canceled Thursday because the city of Plano canceled the school, and it's a good thing we did, but we didn't have any serious weather, but they're promising lots of snow, so we're really just dealing with cold weather. But it's too cold to have services. Our folks are older, and I'm older, and it's just too cold. I want to give you some study in Daniel 2. I don't want to lose the time, and so we're going to look just at the dream of Nebuchadnezzar in chapter 2, verses 24 to 35. And originally I'd scheduled a short study for so we could have a potluck dinner and a Valentine's dinner, but that's all been canceled. We'll have to do that another time. But today I just want to look at the dream itself that Nebuchadnezzar had. Now we know that this is about future kingdoms. We know that because Daniel tells us when he gives thanks to God, he says he removes kings and raises up kings. That's the substance of what this dream is about. And you know the historical background of it. They're killing off the wise men, and finally it comes to Arioch, and he's going to execute Daniel and his friends, and they manage to get an extra bit of time, and God reveals to Daniel what the issue is. So we're coming into this knowing already that God rules the kingdoms of men and has a plan, a set plan for the world. And that's why we're here as a church, because we're watching God work out his plan in the world, and we want to be on the same page that he is. So if we come into the crazy times and the impossible situations that we find ourselves as believers in this current age where we live, this book is perfect for us. And just a couple of observations here. During this time of difficulty with very unusual political situations and massive climate and cultural changes, the changes that are taking place across the world politically and in other ways, it's important that we recognize that God's in control of everything. So in verses 24 and 25, if you'll look in chapter 2 of 24 and 25, first thing I want you to just notice here is that you look out for others no matter what the culture is doing. As believers, God calls us to have a selfless worldview. We're actively looking out for the well-being of other people. You'll see this in verses 24 and 25. So this is Aramaic. Aramaic is like the difference between Canadian and North Carolinian. Yes, we do have a common language of English, but maybe not. Therefore, Daniel went to Arioch, whom the king had appointed or set to kill the wise men of Babylon. So Arioch is the personal name of the chap that's slaughtering the wise men. It's a group of wise men, but they're not particularly wise. And we'll see that as he lists out the kind of people that are in this group to Nebuchadnezzar further down in this passage. And he went to him and said, the wise men of Babylon, do not execute, do not destroy. Take me to before the king, and the interpretation of the king I will reveal. Now please, verse 25. Then Arioch in haste brought Daniel before the king. The reason Arioch's in such a hurry is if he executes all the wise men, he's out of a job. He's the guy that's responsible for all the wise men. So, it's called job security. He's looking out for himself. So he hurries and gets Daniel, because he's already given the order. They're already killing these guys. And they couldn't get it all done through the night, but they started the day before, and now they're continuing with it. So he says to the king in verse 25, thus this is what he said: I have found a man from the sons of the captivity of Judah, who the interpretation to the king will make known. So Arioch takes full credit for nothing. He wants to take the credit that he found this guy, when in reality that's just not what took place. But in this kind of a context, you want to make sure that you look out for other people. That's what Daniel did. That's what we should do, regardless of what the culture does. In verses 26 all the way through verse 30, you'll find that Daniel has no hesitation in looking out for the well-being of others, and also giving God the full credit where it's due. In spite of everything that's going on in Babylon, Daniel gives credit to the true God of heaven. And increasingly we find ourselves in not just a post-Christian culture, but an anti-Christian culture. But we have a God who is in heaven, and he rules over the affairs of men, and we should speak up on his behalf. The king answering and saying to Daniel, whose name he gave him the name Belshazzar, "Are you able to make known, or to cause me to know, the dream which I have seen and the interpretation?" You should pay attention here to the plurals and the singulars as you go through. Here they're both singular, but as we look at this, there's been one dream and multiple visions, and we'll see that as Daniel gives the specificity of the dream to Nebuchadnezzar. God revealed to Daniel exactly what the king had experienced, but he hadn't told anybody else. So verse 27, Daniel answered the king, saying, "The mystery which the king required," in other words, he demanded that the wise men reveal it to him. Not the wise men, nor, and here's you have this grocery list. The astrologers, these were enchanters, chirpers, mutterers. The sorcerers, we would call those magicians. The fortune tellers, soothsayers, they also communicated with the dead. They were not able to reveal to the king. Verse 28, "But there is a God in the heavens." So here Daniel gives credit to God. This king doesn't care about the name of Daniel's God or anything else. Daniel's giving of information to the king has to do with he's the God of heavens. He's the one that sets over the king. He doesn't tell Nebuchadnezzar this, but you have to be careful how much you tell others about the Lord. We all need jobs. You open your mouth at the wrong time, you lose your job. You can lead a lot of people to the Lord by not telling them what they want to hear. My sister in Canada led kids to the Lord all the time. She was being paid by the federal government, Canadian government, to take care of street kids, had the house and great salary, but you couldn't talk with them about spiritual things. So, they'd say to my sister, "How come you're not angry?" And she says, "Oh, I can't tell you that." And she'd walk away, and some days later the kid would come, "Tell me, how did you get over your anger?" "Oh, I can't tell you that. I'd lose my job." And she'd do that 4 or 5, 6 times until the kid is just desperate. "Please tell me, tell me, tell me." And then she'd tell her about the Lord, and led a lot of kids to the Lord like that. But you have to be careful with leading people to Christ. It's like fishing. And here a little bit of information is given out. There is a God in heaven, the God of the heavens, he's called here, plural. And he is revealing, making known mysteries. And he caused the king, Nebuchadnezzar, to know what will be in the latter days. Your dream is singular here. This dream, singular dream, is given by the God of heavens, and it has to do with what's going to happen in the future. And the visions, here it's plural in verse 28, "Then the visions of your head on your bed are these," or actually are this. The grammar here is very specific. So he had multiple visions, one dream, and it's all a single issue. It's this is it. It's not plural. It's this. So Daniel, as he's giving the specificity to Nebuchadnezzar, is very careful to explain exactly what Nebuchadnezzar has experienced. He had one dream, and on his bed he kept having visions, but they're all the same. Verse 29, you king, your thoughts on your bed they came about what would happen after this. So what Nebuchadnezzar was wondering about was what's going to happen after him. He's thinking about the future after he's no longer the king. So again, this is revelation that God gave to Daniel. And the revealer of secrets. Now here, notice another phrase that he uses to describe our Heavenly Father. Here, before he was the God of the heavens, now he's the revealer of secrets. It's tremendously freeing. I'll just give you a free application. God knows everything about us, and he wants us to worship him in our spirits and according to truth. In context of John 4, that's our truth, our secrets. We come to our loving Heavenly Father and we open our hearts to him, and he knows all about us. He knows every aspect of our thoughts. He knows our secrets, but he loves us. He loves people. Did you know that he really, really loves you with all of our sin and all of our evil thoughts? He likes you. He loves you, and he wants you to worship him. So here he's just called the revealer of secrets, has caused you to know what will be. So it's dealing with the future. Now, the first part of verse 30, here you see Daniel, he could have taken all the credit for himself. He doesn't do that. And it's not that there's a lot of wisdom in me. And I, emphatic, I, not in wisdom that should be to me more, or in me more than other living beings, that this secret would be revealed to me. But for everyone's sake. Interesting here in verse 30, but for the text, my Bible translates, it's our sakes, but it's not. It's just a general term, but for sakes, plural. I think the best way to understand that is Daniel says, look, people are dying because you're troubled over this vision. For everybody's sake, your sake, my sake, all the people, for everybody's sake, the revealer of secrets has made this known. But for everyone's sake, the interpretation they caused to be made known to the king, the thoughts of your heart. The they here is not described. It's a reference to the revealer of secrets and the God of heavens. The they, plural, may refer to angels that were involved in the revelatory process, although it's not spelled out. But it's they caused to be made known the thoughts of your heart. Now, in the next section, in verses 30, the last part of verse 30, all the way through verse 34, we get the dream itself. What was it that he actually saw? And I've stopped right at the end of verse 30 because there's a verb here at the end of verse 30 that I think actually should be brought down to verse 31. You, emphatic, you know. So you know, you, O king. I think this is added because Daniel is giving enough specifics here that there will be no question in Nebuchadnezzar's mind that Daniel knows what the king has experienced. You know, you, O king. You were watching, okay, you were watching, and behold, there was a single image. It's a single great image. And this, an image, this great image was full of brightness and splendor. It was extraordinary. And it was standing before you. And the form of it was terrifying. So the vision the dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, and then the multiple revisiting of this dream in visions on his bed. I don't know that there is a lot of difference between the dream and visions. Typically, we would see dreams as in the night while one's sleeping, but these are thoughts that came to him in his head while he's awake. Now, some would say, well, he had psychological problems. We know that from chapter 4, where he had to break with reality. Be that as it may, God gives everybody their slice of reality, and this was Nebuchadnezzar's. So he has these visions, and they're terrifying. The image is terrifying. So it's an extraordinarily bright, large, single image that's standing before him, and he's terrified by it. Verse 32. Now the image, the head of it, now here in the Aramaic it's single. The head of it was of fine gold. So, one of the things that I've always wondered is what made this image terrifying? As you go through it, it doesn't seem terrifying to me, but it was to Nebuchadnezzar. So it's possible that there's something odd about this image. But you'll see that as we go through it. They're plurals where you wouldn't expect to be plural. But here the head is singular. So it's got one head of fine gold, and the chests, plural, the chests of it, and the arms of it of silver, and the bellies of it, and the hips of it, bronze. And now you get to verse 33. So 33, the legs of it, that's a dual. So on this image, you've got multiple chests, multiple arms, multiple hips. But the legs, in Aramaic, there's the ability to do a dual. And so that means two. So Sus would be one horse. Susim would be many horses. Susaim would be two horses. So they have the ability, Susa and Suso would be the feminine. But you have the ability to specify one, two, or more than two. So that's where you get times, singular, times, two times, and half a time. So it's 3.5. But the legs of it, dual, so the two legs of iron, and the feet, plural. You would expect feet to be dual, but it's not. Partly of iron and partly of clay. So we have this image. It seems to me that you've got maybe one head and several bodies, as like a body on this side and a body on that side and a body on that side. So 4 bodies with this single head all attached together. That would be helpful when it comes to be building this image, because it's like 90 feet high and 10 feet wide when he builds this image in chapter 3. But it seems to me that possibly what the terrifying aspect of it is the grotesqueness of the image itself. That he sees it. It's got all these different metals that it's made out of, and then you get down to the feet, and it's plural. So presumably there's a foot to each of the legs, and if there's 2 legs to each of the sets of hips, it's just a weird looking column. And the legs are the feet are partly of clay and partly of iron. Verse 34, you are watching, while you're watching, a stone having been hewn or cut, not with hands. And here dual, so 2 hands didn't touch this stone. It was taken from a mountain, we'll see elsewhere, but it was a stone that appeared not of human origin or human effort, and it struck or smashed the statue on its feet. So the stone, which comes from a distance, not made by hands, that's of no human origin, it comes and it hits the feet of the image, the feet of iron and clay. So it smashes this thing right on the feet, and it caused them to just disintegrate. They were broken into pieces. They were just smashed, obliterated. Here in verse 30, 34, it broke them, shattered them, and then verse 35, all together they were crushed. So it's like, I love to watch chipper shredders. I have a little small one that runs with an extension cord. It's useless. In fact, first time I used it, I broke the blades and I fixed it and gave it away. So I really don't have it anymore. But one of these days I'll buy an attachment for my tractor that works so you can throw logs in there and watch this thing pulverize them and send them off. Recently we had one of these grinders malfunction, and one of the big teeth of these things came loose, and it went right through the middle of the housing and went up and landed and went through the roof of one of the neighboring houses. Serious machine that grinds everything into pieces. Well, that's what happened here. They were crushed all together, the iron and the clay, the bronze and the silver and the gold. And they were just absolutely crushed. They existed like chaff from the threshing floor in the summertime. So this stone hits the image's feet and then pulverizes that, and then pulverizes everything up. So it hits at the feet and grinds that thing up and pulls that thing down and grinds up everything all the way to the top of the head till there's nothing left but a pile of chaff. And the wind lifted them up, and the whole thing was gone. Not a trace was found anywhere. There was nowhere to be found a trace of them, of any of them. So the kingdoms, we're kind of getting ahead interpreting here, but these kingdoms are completely obliterated by this stone cut without hands. And the stone that smashed the image, it existed and became a great mountain, and it filled the whole earth. So this stone, which he'll explain is the coming millennial kingdom, it filled the whole earth. So in verse 35, you have the result of the stone hitting the image and what happened to it. And then in verse 36, he says, "This is the dream." So the king already knows. Daniel knows what he's talking about, down to the specificity of single dream, multiple visions. He was wondering what's going to happen after him. He tells them that the God of the heavens is the revealer of secrets, and that this is what's going to happen after him. And he gets all of the details right. He gets everything absolutely specific, down to the very graphic description of the image that he saw. All right, so next time we get together, we'll be looking at the interpretation of this dream. And I didn't want to lose a Sunday. I want to get into Daniel as quickly as we can and see the relevance for where we are during the times of the Gentiles. But have a good Sunday. Stay warm. My love to you all. Bye-bye.